Hello, all you freedom-loving people. As trade talks progress with China and India, a big name who was unhappy with the tariffs is promoting protests to go nationwide on Saturday, and the FBI arrested hundreds of alleged child predators in Texas. Okay, let's get into it. On Tuesday, California authorities filed an emergency motion in federal court to urgently stop the federal government from sending troops to participate in immigration enforcement actions. Earlier on Monday, the state of California filed a lawsuit against the federal government to prevent Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth from deploying 700 Marines to assist the National Guard in maintaining order in Los Angeles. California asked the federal judge to issue a temporary restraining order within 2 hours to prevent the National Guard and Marine Corps from participating in ICE raids. But Senior District Court Judge Charles R. Breyer denied the state of California's request for a temporary restraining order and instead scheduled a hearing for 1:30 p.m. on Thursday. The judge asked the parties to submit additional written arguments before the hearing. In a brief filing with the court on Tuesday afternoon, the Justice Department said that California's request was without merit and that if granted, it would jeopardize the safety of DHS personnel and interfere with the federal government's ability to carry out its actions. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass also declared a curfew in specific areas of downtown from 8 p.m. Tuesday night until 6 a.m. the next morning. Bass announced at a press conference and followed it with a post online. Her post on X said, "If you do not live or work in downtown LA, avoid the area. Law enforcement will arrest individuals who break the curfew and you will be prosecuted. But downtown residents, commuters, and media personnel will be allowed to pass through without curfew." Bass also said that the city may impose another curfew in the coming nights. Meanwhile, Bass reiterated her call for the Trump administration to end ICE's arrests of illegal migrants. From the White House, President Trump promised that law enforcement would continue to make daily arrests in Los Angeles. National Guard units currently deployed to the area have begun assisting in the raids and protecting ICE personnel from protesters. And as the Trump administration took a hard line against protesters in Los Angeles, demonstrations in other cities followed, with images of confrontations continuing to circulate. At the site of a demonstration in Los Angeles, protesters claimed that Los Angeles once belonged to Mexico.
This is our city, and this was Mexico. You can't kick us out of the land that was ours. Donald Trump! Fascism! Let our people free! Let our people free!
Demonstrations in Houston and Austin were relatively peaceful. In Austin, hundreds of protesters gathered on Monday between the state capitol building and the federal building that houses an office for the staff of ICE. And thousands of protesters gathered in Lower Manhattan on Tuesday, but 34 people were arrested and charged in Manhattan. And in California, Los Angeles is not the only city where people have been demonstrating. Thousands of people have protested in San Francisco, and more than 150 people were arrested on Sunday. And then on Tuesday, some 200 protesters gathered outside the San Francisco Immigration Court, and protests were also held in nearby Oakland. And in addition, in order to protest ICE enforcement and the apprehending and deporting of illegal migrants, a number of funded groups claim to be holding events this Saturday in New York, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Tennessee, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Texas, California, and several other states. The groups No Kings and 50501 have partnered to host protests in these states. Protest organizers wrote in a statement on their website, "They've defied our courts, deported Americans, disappeared people off the streets, attacked our civil rights, and slashed our services. The corruption has gone too far. No thrones, no crowns, no kings. They are currently planning, preparing, and mobilizing people to take to the streets via Zoom conference calls in order to fight the Trump administration's crackdown on illegal immigration." And Walmart heiress Christy Walton is also funding full-page color ads in the New York Times for No Kings Day. Walmart could face backlash from shoppers who choose to step back from the retailer, potentially impacting sales. And this Saturday marks the day that the Trump administration celebrates the Army's 250th anniversary with a massive military parade in Washington, D.C. It also coincides with President Trump's 79th birthday. But the protest groups said that they would not protest in Washington, D.C. The groups claim instead of allowing this birthday parade to be the center of gravity, we will make action everywhere else the story of America. That day, people coming together in community across the country to reject strongman politics and corruption. President Trump has said that protesters at Saturday's military parade in the city will be met with very big force. Texas Governor Greg Abbott also said that he is ready to deploy the state's National Guard in response to the protests that are to be held in Austin, Texas. So Elon Musk has expressed regret over his recent posts about President Trump. Very early this morning, Musk wrote on X, "I regret some of my posts about President Donald Trump last week. They went too far." Tesla shares rose 2.5% in pre-market trading following the posts. And a few hours later, the host of the Pod Force One podcast, Miranda Devine, published an interview with President Trump. On the podcast, they discussed multiple topics, including the recent riots, the online spat with Elon Musk, and the nuclear deal with Iran. Regarding Musk, President Trump said that he was open to forgiving Musk, and today President Trump said that he has no hard feelings, but was surprised.
Well, I have no hard feelings. I was really surprised that happened. He went after a bill that's phenomenal. It's the best thing we've ever signed in this country, and that's phase one. Phase two, phase three. All of a sudden, it all comes together. It's coming together so well. And when he did that, I was not a happy camper. So it's too bad.
You said he had problems. What kind of problems? I mean, is it the drugs?
I don't know what his problem is, really. I don't know. I haven't thought too much about him in the last little while. But the bill is so good. When he went after the bill, this bill is going to turn around this country so fast your head will spin. It's good for everyone. It's also a tax cut. It's a massive tax cut. It's an extension of debt, which we need. We have to get that. And then we're going to start paying off debt at record levels. It's tariffs on certain people. It's, by the way, no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security.
All your promises.
Yeah. And I mean, it's no tax on overtime. If a worker works overtime, there's no tax. That's going to be a great stimulant for the country. No, I think a bill is great. And
he just didn't
I think
get that.
he feels very badly that he said that, actually.
And maybe it was something else. I mean, he had the fight with Scott Bessent outside your office.
Yeah, well, they had not a fist fight, people, but I guess they had a little bit of a shouting match. But that's
Did you hear it?
That's typical. I heard it a little bit. That's sort of typical about,
And regarding Iran, President Trump said that he doesn't think Iran wants a deal.
I'm less confident now than I would have been a couple of months ago. Something happened to them, but I am much less confident of a deal being made. I would have said a deal would be made. Maybe they don't want to make a deal. What can I say? And maybe they do.
So what does that mean?
There's nothing final.
What happens then?
Well, if they don't make a deal, they're not going to have a nuclear weapon.
Right.
If they do make a deal, they're not going to have a nuclear weapon too, but they're not going to have a nuclear weapon. So it's not going to matter from that standpoint. But it would be nicer to do it without warfare, without people dying.
Yeah.
It's so much nicer to do it. But I don't think I see the same level of enthusiasm for them to make a deal. I think I think they would make a mistake, but we'll see. I guess time will tell.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has also told Congress about the indications that Iran is moving toward nuclear weapons. Hegseth is testifying before the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Defense these days. And today, in response to Senator Lindsey Graham, who asked if Israel thinks Iran would use a nuclear weapon, General Dan Raisin-Kane said, potentially. But let's check out how Hegseth responded.
What do you think, Mr. Secretary? If they had a nuclear weapon, would they use it to wipe out Israel?
I think Israel believes, quite understandably,
Do you believe that?
That it is an existential
Do
threat
you
to their
believe
existence.
that?
Hold on, and then in the hands of the wrong Iranian, a cleric or a radical, that they would seek to
Well,
use
is this a radical cleric that exists there today?
Well, as of
If
right
he's
now,
not,
yes.
who the hell would be? So I'm trying to get everybody to think, let's don't do what we did in the 30s. They're going to use a nuclear weapon if they get it. Are they trying to build a nuclear weapon versus a peaceful nuclear power program, Mr. Secretary? Have the Iranians been trying to build a nuke?
There are plenty of indications that they have been moving their way towards something that would look a lot like a nuclear weapon.
A U.S. delegation led by senior officials from the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative and officials from India's Trade Ministry, led by India's chief negotiator Rajesh Agrawal, held the latest round of closed-door talks on Tuesday. The new round of talks focused on market access, tariff cuts, and non-tariff barriers for industrial products and some agricultural goods. An Indian government source said the negotiations held with the U.S. side were productive and helped in making progress toward crafting a mutually beneficial and balanced agreement, including through achievement of early wins. The two sides discussed increasing bilateral digital trade through improved customs and trade facilitation measures. And the talks are continuing, with the two sides expected to sign a tentative agreement by the end of the month. Officials added that the next phase of talks could address more complex issues and the signing of the first part of the bilateral trade agreement in September or October. There was also progress in the second round of US-China trade talks in London, England. The second day of talks ended late at night local time. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said, "We have reached a framework to implement the Geneva Consensus." He noted that the deal should resolve issues between the two countries on rare earths and magnets. Delegates will now submit their proposals to their respective leaders for approval. Lutnick also said, if that is approved, we will then implement the framework. In a separate press conference, Chinese Vice Minister of Commerce Li Chenggang also said the two sides have reached a trade framework agreement which will be submitted to the heads of the two countries. Lutnick said Chinese restrictions on rare earth exports to the U.S. are a fundamental part of the latest agreement, and the U.S. expects the issue will be resolved in this framework implementation. U.S. restrictions on sales of advanced tech to China in recent weeks would also be rolled back as Beijing approves rare earth exports. Lutnick added that the U.S. has taken several steps in the face of insufficient supplies of rare earths. He said, also, there were a number of measures the United States of America put on when those rare earths were not coming in. You should expect those to come off, as President Trump said, in a balanced way. President Trump revealed more details of the framework agreement on Truth Social. He confirmed that the agreement will ensure Chinese supplies the necessary rare earths and full magnets. In exchange, the United States will allow Chinese students to use its colleges and universities, which President Trump says has always been good with him. He wrote, "We are getting a total of 55% tariffs. China is getting 10%. Relationship is excellent." Although many details have not yet been finalized, the framework agreement seems to have been reached more smoothly than expected. Some people have warned that Beijing did not take seriously the trade contracts that it signed with the U.S. during President Trump's first term in office. And in the course of those negotiations, the CCP used tactics to drag out the negotiations as long as possible until President Trump's four-year term was almost finished. So these people are worried that the Trump administration will fall into the same river again this time. But I'm optimistic that President Trump won't be fooled twice by the same tactics. Most importantly, the internal situation of the CCP is very different from what it was 6 years ago. Regarding the situation of Xi Jinping, there is some new information recently. Following Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko's three-day visit to China on June 2nd, a relatively complete video of his meeting with Xi Jinping was released by Belarusian officials. From the video footage, it seems that this is not an official venue for receiving foreign heads of state, nor is it Xi Jinping's office. Xi Jinping also said that his office was nearby. This is the first time he has received an overseas guest at this location.
Привет. 我们先在这儿谈一谈。Сначала поговорим здесь, а потом победа. Буквально рядышком. Мой кабинет. Впервые здесь я вас принял.
In other words, this could be Xi Jinping's residence. You may ask, President Trump also meets with foreign leaders at Mar-a-Lago, so what's so special about that? The leader of the CCP is not President Trump. They never receive foreign leaders in their private homes. And Xi Jinping also said his office is nearby, so why didn't he meet Lukashenko at his office? The only plausible explanation is that he was unable to meet Lukashenko at his office, and there is speculation that he may have been placed under house arrest. arrest. In addition, after President Trump and Xi Jinping spoke by phone late last week, Xinhua, the official media of the Chinese Communist Party, has released a news flash titled, "Xi Jinping and U.S. President Donald Trump speak by phone." The odd thing about this story is that not only in the title but also in the body of the article, Xi Jinping's name is not preceded by his title, whereas President Trump's name is preceded by his title. And the whole story was too simplistic. Obviously, the media is not sure what tone to use in reporting this story. President Trump said that Xi Jinping invited President Trump and the First Lady to visit China. And President Trump invited Mr. and Mrs. Xi Jinping to visit the United States. However, in the official CCP report, only Xi Jinping's invitation to President Trump was mentioned, but not President Trump's invitation to Xi Jinping. This is also very abnormal. The CCP has always publicized invitations to visits by Western heads of state as something to brag about. This time, it has been interpreted as a sign that Xi Jinping will not be able to visit the U.S. anymore. President Trump's tariffs have also won a victory in court. The Federal Circuit Court of Appeals ruled on Tuesday to allow President Trump's global tariff measures to remain in effect pending completion of the appeals process. This allows the Trump administration to maintain its Liberation Day tariffs on most U.S. trading partners, including fentanyl tariffs on Canada, China, and Mexico, while it challenges the lower court's ruling. The case began on May 28th when the U.S. Court of International Trade ruled that President Trump's invocation of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to impose tariffs on multiple countries was unconstitutional. The court held that the U.S. Constitution gives Congress, not the President, the power to tax and collect tariffs. The act applies only to extraordinary and substantial national emergencies, and according to the Court of International Trade, the Trump administration's moves do not qualify. But the Trump administration quickly appealed, and the Federal Circuit in Washington immediately froze the lower court's ruling the following day. And moving forward, the current tariffs are not the rates that the Trump administration will ultimately enforce, but they are an important bargaining chip for President Trump in his negotiations with his trading partners. Although the Federal Circuit has not yet ruled on whether President Trump's invocation of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act is proper, it has allowed the Trump administration to maintain its current tariff policies while the appeal is pending. As a result, the Trump administration is immune from the international court's ruling in the ensuing tariff negotiations. The FBI and other agencies announced at a June 10th news conference in Dallas that a months-long investigation in Texas snared 244 alleged online child sex predators. This marks the second month in a row that the FBI has announced large-scale arrests of online predators. Last month, FBI Director Kash Patel announced that 205 suspects had been arrested in a nationwide sweep called Operation Restore Justice. And this month, the Texas-based investigation known as Operation Soteria's Shield rescued 109 children and gathered terabytes of illicit data. And it doesn't stop here. The new evidence could lead to additional arrests and identifying victims. So far, officials have not disclosed the details of the charges. However, at the news conference, they displayed names and photographs of the defendants. At the press conference, FBI Dallas said that the effort proves the agency's commitment to relentlessly pursue those who prey on children and to ensure that survivors are no longer silenced or hiding in the shadows. The conference also featured remarks from Texas police chiefs whose departments participated in the operation. Dallas Police Chief Daniel C. Como said that the operation, which began in April, involved a huge team effort. Kash Patel also wrote in a social media post, "We're taking them off the streets and not stopping." And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for your support of Front Page. Please remember to leave a comment below the video. This is really helping us to be seen all around the world. The more people who watch Front Page, the more freedom-loving people the world will have. And please hit the like button and hit the notification bell after subscribing. And please share this video with your friends and family because everybody deserves to know the truth.